Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today we'll learn about U.S. citizens who have been detained during immigration crackdowns.
Even when they saw his real ID that he had in his pocket, they dismissed it as probably fake. And so he spent, they believe, like another hour or two before they were able to determine his citizenship to their satisfaction.
Then we'll hear from one of the people who helped establish urban farming in Milwaukee. Plus, we'll visit the West Allis Farmers Market to learn about the vendors and what they give to the community.
You know, farming is not cute. You know, it looks cute on a Hallmark movie, but it takes so much work. But most of the folks who do it because they love it.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. As the federal government has carried out its widespread immigration crackdown, some U.S. citizens have been rounded up and detained. According to a ProPublica report, more than 170 U.S. citizens have been taken into Department of Homeland Security custody. While in custody, some of these citizens have been kicked, dragged, and denied water. DHS responded to this reporting by calling it, quote, fake news. Nicole Foy is the investigative reporter at ProPublica who broke this story. She joins WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez to share what she's learned.
Over 170 U.S. citizens have been held and detained by immigration officials, which is probably an undercount considering the fact that you're doing this all by yourself as a team. And a lot of these interactions have some pretty violent videos that come with them, like with Leonardo Garcia Venegas.
All right, dude, you're making this more complicated than you want to.
Yeah, Leo's case is one that's pretty significant because he's the kind of case that is particularly interesting because one of the things when the Supreme Court lifted a restraining order in the Los Angeles area on immigration officers who were using things like race, the industry you worked in, whether you spoke Spanish or English as a way to determine whether to stop someone. He's one of those cases where he almost hits like all of those factors. He was working in construction in Alabama when he was part of a workplace raid in which he says that immigration officers who came and skipped right past the black and white workers on the construction site that day and immediately started detaining Latino workers.
I'll show my papers. No. I don't see anything. I see anything. I got ground.
He was filming the arrest, the pretty violent arrest of his brother, who was undocumented, when officers, you can see in the video, start coming towards him and trying to detain him. You hear him insisting that he's a citizen. You hear in the follow-up video that his coworkers filmed, you hear them yelling that he's a citizen, he has his paperwork. And yet, not only did officers continue to detain him, even when they saw his real ID that he had in his pocket, they dismissed it as probably fake. And so he spent, they believe, like another hour or two before they were able to determine his citizenship to their satisfaction. And then 2 weeks later, it happened again. Once again, someone came into the work site where he was, inside of the house that he was building, and he had to leave with them. It wasn't as violent and dramatic as last time and wasn't caught on video, but he still had to leave again, and they again dismissed his real ID as fake. And so he has filed a federal lawsuit because he believes that he has no reason to believe that he won't just keep getting stopped like this.
Let's talk about that because there's a lot that you've kind of laid out that I think deserve to be unpacked a bit more. But you talked about the Supreme Court ruling and Kavanaugh's statement on it, which I want to ask you about. But this has basically led into a violation of constitutional rights, both of citizens and non-citizens as well. Is that correct?
It was filed because several groups, several U.S. citizens, several legal permanent residents, and other people who are undocumented but do feel that they were detained in a way that used racial profiling instead of intelligence or other like reasonable suspicion factors that normally are what immigration agents say that they're using to detain people, and instead claim that it was just part of these roving patrols. People allege that officers really just stopped them because they happened to be working in a manual labor job and were Latino. The government has denied this pretty emphatically, I want to say, but we found that in our investigation that as of October 5th, because we did have to stop counting in order to publish the story, around 50 US citizens around the country have experienced being held or detained even longer by immigration agents who were questioning their citizenship. The majority of them were Latino, but then there's this other category, which I can get into, that, because of this rapid expansion of enforcement around the country, we're also seeing many more US citizens get detained, not just because officers are doubting their citizenship, but on allegations of assaulting officers or interfering or obstructing arrests, whether at protests or because they're trying to intervene in the arrests of family members or neighbors that they see playing out in front of them.
As family and lawyers were trying and struggling to find people who, even immigration courts and holdings can be so difficult themselves just to try to find folks. How did you go about the work to do that? How did you find these people where it sounds like even those closest to them were struggling to know what to do next?
And I want to be clear too, like the reason this count exists is because of how much local reporters around the country have done documenting these cases. And many of the cases that we could not include are ones that have been playing out the last 2 or 3 weeks in Chicago and Portland. And I think we're going to learn a lot more as the weeks go on, just like it took a long time to figure out what happened in LA because of how intense immigration enforcement was. But, we spoke to lawyers, we spoke to people who experienced it, we reviewed local news reports, lots and lots of videos, court filings, because we had a very narrow interest, which is just, were they detained or held for any period of time by immigration agents specifically? So that means that if you were arrested at a protest by like LAPD, like in Los Angeles, we didn't include that, mostly because our interest was in this increasing level of deployment of federal law enforcement officials, mostly immigration officials, into communities in ways that we have not seen before.
With this report now out and kind of like keep an eye on this, has the federal government responded to this reporting or any of these cases? Like what have they had to say about this?
Immediately after a story published, the Department of Homeland Security put out a tweet with screenshots of our story with fake news on it. But honestly, what they said in their tweet is largely what they told me, have been telling me for 6 months. I've been reporting on this since March, saying that we absolutely do not racially profile. However, when citizens who attack law enforcement or obstruct law enforcement will be prosecuted. There's been some other responses. There is going to be a joint congressional oversight investigation that was just announced on Monday. And that's also going to heavily involve the city of LA because of how much has been documented by many reporters there about citizens who have been detained. So I think there is a lot of interest from Democrats in Congress to investigate this issue further. But the Department of Homeland Security and White House officials have firmly said that they are not racially profiling. The Supreme Court, in the case of LA, vindicated them in this area, they believe. And, citizens who have been arrested, it's because they were assaulting law enforcement.
Thinking about this longer term in the moment that we're at, what changes does this signal for DHS and immigration officials during this time? And what do you think we can see going forward?
Well, that's a hard question. I think that the White House, the Department of Homeland Security seems eager to continue to use federal law enforcement officers, immigration officers in this way, particularly in cities that they claim either are not dealing with what they view as their illegal immigration problem, or that they feel are experiencing high levels of crime. We didn't even include National Guard in our count. So like it's really a drastic undercount. But I think that there's an increasing interest in using federal law enforcement this way. And I think we're going to continue to see some of these lines blurring between the federal government powers and local law enforcement and local government powers. Like we certainly see it in the fights over who gets to deploy the National Guard. I think there is certainly like a federalism battle playing out right now, but it's really difficult when US citizens and immigrants are caught up in it because there are fewer avenues for people who want to sue federal officers than there is for other local law enforcement. It's incredibly difficult. People have filed claims for damages, especially if they are claiming wrongful arrest because of their citizenship status, but it's kind of unclear what level of accountability is going to be available for them.
Nicole Foy is an investigative reporter at ProPublica. She spoke with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez about her reporting. Food assistance benefits will likely be delayed for millions of people because of the government shutdown. Earlier this month, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced there was funding through the end of October for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. But it added that if the federal government shutdown continues, there won't be any funds to pay for November benefits. Governor Tony Evers says that would impact 700,000 Wisconsinites. He says even if the shutdown ended this week, benefits would still be delayed for November. Hunger Task Force is preparing to fill in where it can. The organization's CEO, Matt King, says the number of people needing food was already on the rise. Now that need could be exacerbated by the delay in food share benefits. King joins WUWM's race and ethnicity reporter Taryn Powell to look at the impact.
That number of over 700,000 people participating in food share in Wisconsin has been fairly steady over the last few years. What has increased alongside the cost of living has been the demand that's been put onto the food pantry or emergency food system, which is really designed as a safety net to help people during an emergency, but then actively transition people to a more sustainable and ongoing resource like the food share program. Over the past year, food pantries across the state of Wisconsin have seen on average more than a 30% increase in visits, with a lot of families and older adults just looking for a little bit of help to get through the month. The increase in rent, the increase in the price of groceries has had a particular effect on that demand. And so that increase in demand will be exacerbated then by this delay in food share benefits being issued. Hunger Task Force is in a strong position with food resources to help people in need. And so it's important for people to know that there is help if they're in need, and they can reach out and we can connect them with a food resource near them.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that because I was going to say, what is Hunger Task Force prepared to do and what you all can handle if those benefits do not, in fact, come November?
Hunger Task Force has been preparing for this possibility, and we always stand ready to help the community in times of emergency. So we have had to make some additional food purchases to make sure that we're able to stock the shelves at food pantries in anticipation of increased demand, which we've already seen over the last couple days since this announcement came out. But that's because we have such great community support. And so in times like this, we also look to the community to help us to make sure that we can continue to make those food purchases as necessary.
Is it planned out to a certain extent, like months? Like, do we know how long Hunger Task Force can manage this?
Yeah, Hunger Task Force it definitely has the ability to provide resources in the near term to handle short-term disruptions and short-term strain on the emergency food system. But the emergency food system is not set up to take the place of food share. With over 700,000 people receiving food share on a monthly basis and over $110 million in benefits being issued, that's not a gap that can just be made up by food pantries. And it also has an economic effect. The food share program brings in over $1 billion annually to the Wisconsin state budget. And so in a lot of communities where you have a rural grocery store, then the food share program is an important part of the revenue that they bring in on a monthly basis. And so this delay in funding is going to be felt not only by individuals needing assistance, but by the businesses and markets that work with the program as well. So what we do know is that food share benefits in the month of November will be delayed. There has been no federal communication to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services indicating that EBT cards would be deactivated or that benefits will be lost. Historically, during shutdowns like this, when there is a delay in the issuance of payments, then when the government reopens, DHS will notify members and those payments that they missed will then be made up. I think it's important for people to know that other programs like WIC, Badger Care, and Medicaid are still funded and still available, and that as of now, there is no anticipated delay in those programs.
For people who are unfamiliar with how food share benefits are funded, if you could just give a little insight to that.
Yeah, the food share program is known nationally as SNAP, and it's funded by the federal government. So 100% of the payments to individuals come through the federal government, through the USDA, and then it's administered in our state by the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. So Hunger Task Force coordinates with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services daily. And in this case, we have a daily communication for any updates to make sure that impacted recipients have the most up-to-date information and that food assistance organizations also have the most up-to-date information.
Wonder if you have anything else to add to like alternatives people have in the meantime, or if you have any knowledge of folks pushing for a change in the current situation that we're in right now.
One thing that's worth noting is that in the past, the federal government has utilized contingency funds to keep the food share program going. And so there's currently a groundswell of voices asking the federal government to utilize the contingency funds and the funding authority that's available to them to issue these benefits so that there is no lapse, even in the case of a prolonged government shutdown.
And so that would be something that Congress or the Trump administration would have to give the word on?
The USDA has both the authority and the resources to maintain SNAP operations through contingency authority, and they have access to contingency reserves that can and should be used to sustain the benefit issuance during these lapses.
How can we kind of just really show like this is a really dire kind of situation? Like, what is the impact of this being the reality for Wisconsinites who rely on food share?
Right now, we're already in a situation where a lot of families and older adults in communities across our state are faced with tough choices, keeping a roof over their family's head, paying the utility bills, or skipping a meal, or for a lot of older adults, affording their medications or skipping meals. And that's where food assistance organizations step in to help where needed, but that's always been coupled with the support of the SNAP, or in Wisconsin, Food Share program. And so taking away that resource from that emergency food system is really going to harm families ultimately.
Matt King is the CEO of Hunger Task Force. He spoke with WUWM's race and ethnicity reporter Taryn Powell. In about 10 minutes, we'll visit the West Allis Farmers Market and learn what it gives to the community. But first, we'll meet a man who pioneered urban agriculture in Milwaukee and learn how his work has impacted local food production. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. Will Allen is a former professional basketball player, but he decided to trade the court for crops. Allen is credited as a pioneer in urban agriculture in Milwaukee. He started Growing Power in 1995. The nonprofit initiative revolutionized how the city thought about local food production and education. Growing Power ceased operations in 2017 in the face of legal and financial problems. But the organization left its mark, paving the way for future flourishing urban agriculture initiatives in Milwaukee. WUWM's Eric Vaughn fellow Maria Peralta Ariano spoke with Allen as part of her series called Feeding the City, The People Powering Local Food.
Will Allen's farm stand sits on a long stretch of road on Drexel Avenue in Oak Creek, just across the street from the original 25 acres where he began his farming career. I stood next to his large black pickup truck in the farm stand this summer as Allen fixed himself along the edge of the truck bed to chat. Allen explained to me what urban agriculture looked like as he entered the field in 1993.
Well, there was a program called Shoots and Roots that was run by the county, Milwaukee County, and they had some vacant lot production going on back then in the inner city. But what happened after that, they pretty much shut down all those gardens in the inner city for whatever reason. I don't want to get into it, but, you know, and the ones that remained were the ones on the outskirts of the city, still within the city proper, but not in the inner city. There was a lot of knowledge from people from the South, but they didn't seem to want to go back into agriculture after all the bad things that had happened, especially to black people in the South. So I actually started out here in Oak Creek. Right across the street was 25 acres, and behind my house, right behind you, another 25 acres that I farmed. And then I was asked to help some folks in the city, and that's how I kind of got involved in the city.
Allen, who grew up farming, was working in sales and sales technology for Procter & Gamble at the time, but he left the job and got further involved in urban farming. He says he bought the last remaining farm in the city of Milwaukee on 55th and Silver Spring.
The farm was established in the late 1920s. It had 6 A-frame greenhouses, and they were in bad disarray, and the city owned the property, and I was able to buy it for a pretty decent price. And that's when the work began.
Growing Power became a catalyst for urban agriculture in the city. The nonprofit focused on educating youth and employing locals, but was also a place where Allen perfected and pioneered farming techniques, such as his aquaponics system. He integrated fish in his city farm, creating an ecosystem that could sustain all the proper nutrients to the plants he was growing to feed the community. This technique also allowed him to grow in stacked beds, allowing him to maximize smaller urban spaces. Allen was a radical grower who had a global influence. He wrote books to sow children's interest in growing food. He spoke across the nation, and he taught other farmers and communities the techniques he created. Despite its closure in 2017, Growing Power left its mark.
The legacy has been that I've trained most of the people that got involved in urban agriculture in the city of Milwaukee. So if you talk to most of those people, which you probably have, they'll probably bring up my name, because they came through our trainings and we trained them. And, hopefully some of them are, starting to work in those communities. That there's lots of land. There's probably over 2,000 vacant lots in the city of Milwaukee, so there's land.
Allen acknowledges the strength of urban growers and the action being taken by communities to localize food production. But he says the farming world that he once knew is not the same.
Well, I think the biggest change, it's very difficult to find people that want to get involved in growing food, because it's hard work. I mean, look at this year when you have 80, 90 degree temperatures and humidity and everything. It's very difficult. Our Hmong community has done a great job over the years since they moved down from Minnesota years ago and got involved in the farmers markets. Without the Hmong farmers, we wouldn't have farmers markets in this city. Back when I was going to farmers markets, we would go to 13 farmers markets in one day. And it was difficult, but that's the way things were back then.
Allen says today there are farmers markets throughout the city and the suburbs, but a lot of them don't have vendors offering produce.
They have a lot of people selling everything but food, and we need food. People need food at a reasonable price, because the prices in the grocery stores are outrageous. So we need people growing food, but there's not a lot of food growers anymore. It's more, if you go to a farmer's market, I bet you 50% of the vendors there are not farmers. They're just selling other stuff.
In that same vein, where have we found success in urban agriculture here that we may have not had in the past?
Well, I think there's some success with a few of the groups that really have sustained themselves. Hasn't been many, because like I said, it's hard work and it's hard to find people that want to do the work. So I think that's the biggest challenge. I think there's a lot of challenges. And I think the cities haven't gotten on board to help develop the growers and provide the funding that's necessary for folks to grow inside the city, to be able to develop these vacant lots, to be able to have the right kind of soil, because it's something a statement I came up with years and years ago. It's all about the soil.
Allen still uses his farmland and skills to educate those who are interested in farming. He hopes to continue to build the next generation of Milwaukee farmers.
And I love to train young people that are interested. And there are some young people. I have two 20-year-olds that I'm training right now that want to be farmers. So that's what it's going to take. I'm also working with kids with autism here on this farm, and that's very satisfying to me, because my youngest grandson, I have 5 grandsons, has autism, so that's very gratifying to me to be able to see what changes can happen in their lives when they touch the soil and when they grow food. It's been very, very satisfying.
I'll continue to explore urban agriculture all week during Morning Edition and Lake Effect in my series, Feeding the City, the people powering local food. On Tuesday, I'll report on the challenges and opportunities for local farmers with visits to Crops on Top in the River West neighborhood and Wisconsin's largest hydroponics operation, 100 Acre Farm. For Lake Effect, I'm Eric Vaughn Fellow, Maria Peralta Arellano.
Every month, we chat with Venus Williams for a series we call Dig In. Venus is the executive director of Alice's Garden and the Fondy Food Center, which includes the Fondy Farmers Market. Venus is a fan of pretty much all local farmers markets. One of her favorites is also one of the oldest in the area. The West Allis Farmers Market has been operating for more than a century. Generations of local farmers have relied on the market as a way of selling directly to people in the community. I met up with Venus at the market for this month's Dig In.
Venus Williams, thank you as always for joining us on Lake Effect and today joining us at the West Allis Farmers Market.
Yes, this is, I say it about every farmer's market, but this is one of my favorite farmers markets because it's one of my original farmers markets. When I first came to the city of Milwaukee, Miss Gloria Wright, elder in the community, introduced me to the West Allis Farmers Market, and specifically some of the farmers and farms and vendors. So this is a very nostalgic market for me, and one that I try to get to at least 2 or 3 times throughout the year.
What I find amazing about the West Allis Farmers Market is there's so many farmers markets that are almost like a pop-up kind of in a park, you know, but this farmers market has a whole setup. This is a structure that we're in.
Right, it has the infrastructure that we're familiar with at the Fondy Farmers Market, but we have seen the West Allis Farmers Market be transformed, I don't know how many years ago, but in the recent decade, it has done upgrades and added to its beauty and its permanence in this community.
It seems like it's also allowed it to not just be a farmer's market that you might be going to on the weekend, but you know, we're here in the middle of the week, and it's a place that has fresh fruits and vegetables, depending on the time of year, readily available in the week.
Right, that Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule is an incredible schedule, and it's a hard one to maintain sometimes, but it is so worth it when people are looking for things beyond the weekend. Where do you send them? The West Allis Farmers Market is one of those places that I'm always sending folks to, especially on a Tuesday, like today.
Like today. Now, much like Fondy, we are looking at a lot of produce here. This is a true farmer's market.
Yes, we're standing here at Bowers Produce, and this is, again, one of my favorites. They've been around for at least 56 years, if I've done my homework correctly. And before I leave here today, I will get some of these favorite, I think they're called not Cameroon, I can't remember what this pepper is called. This red pepper from them that I really love. So I will get some peppers here. I will get some of their cabbage. Even though I have lacinato kale in my backyard, that kale is so beautiful, and they've already done the work for me, and that means I can harvest mine in November. This is without a doubt one of my favorite places to be. And then, you know, we're talking about variety. We're talking about, when I walk through the West Allis Farmers Market, like many markets, it's the texture of things. I mean, look at the pumpkins and the gourds and all of the different kinds of squash and apples. I know I'm teasing you all who are listening because I'm saying look at, and you can't see it. I'll be getting the fresh apple cider. This is also a favorite vendor of mine, the homegrown popcorn. Where else can you get all of these varieties of popcorn but at a true blue farmer's market, right? You think popcorn is popcorn, but popcorn is not popcorn. Depending upon the corn kernel, that determines the taste and how long you're gonna pop it and what you may or may not need to add to it. So much variety, so many stories. We know that food itself has a story, but the farmers and the farms who grow the food also have a story. And this is one of those markets where over my 36 years here in living in Milwaukee, I come here and I meet new farmers, but I also like to continue to connect to the farmers who I've been talking to for 30 years.
What's kind of amazing, you're looking at all these varieties here, but there's also little signs that'll be like, well, these are canning tomatoes. This is how you're going to use this. I've been to the West Allis Farmers Market a number of times and encountered produce that I'm not exactly familiar with. And when you talk to them and you're like, hey, so is this kind of like, they know everything.
Right. The education related to food is an extremely important element for any market. And when a farmer has taken the time to not just harvest and set up a beautiful display, but to make themselves available, whether through signage or through answering your questions related to the produce that they have grown, that's where the passion comes out. Farming is not cute. It looks cute on a Hallmark movie, but it takes so much work. But most of the folks who do it because they love it and because they're so passionate about it. And when you ask the questions about their produce, that's when you get the stories. That's when you get to really understand the value in shop local and support your farmer and know your grower and all of those things that seem like bumper stickers, but they really are at the heart of a farmer's market such as this. How can I not say this is one of my favorite farmers? Because this is Ning, who grows at Allis's Garden Urban Farm, amongst other places. Ning is here every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and I love what Ning represents because we talked about some huge farms and some huge orchards, but what it means to be an urban grower in a few plots, but you can still show up at a farmer's market. You can still create a livelihood through the smallest or multiple garden plots at local community gardens.
So we're looking around, we're seeing a lot of apples, which I think people expect this time of year. One of the things, I think people assume July is when you're going to get your best tomato. I'm still seeing quite a lot of tomatoes out.
We have had an extremely extended growing season this year. And so part of why you are seeing so many tomatoes, there are two reasons. The warmth that we've had. This is one of our first chilly days, and it's October 21st, and normally we have this temperature mid-September. There's that, but there's also a lot of greenhouse tomato growing here in the state of Wisconsin. And so when you see some of the tomatoes that may look a little more perfect and uniform than the ones you have grown in your yard, or you go out there and you're like, mine have all of these blotches on it, the greenhouse tomatoes look a little better. Okay, I said it. Because the temperature is more controlled. But they are still grown locally and by a farmer who loves to grow. And so now we are coming upon a farmer, a vendor that I have been frequenting for 30 years, however long I've been here in Milwaukee, and it's the Weston's Antique Apple Orchard. I believe she told me this orchard has been in existence since 1938. And when you look here, you see the names of some apples that you're not going to see in your grocery store and not necessarily at other vendors here. So when you talk about antique apples, you're really talking about heritage and heirloom and apples that they have intentionally kept alive, and trees they have intentionally decided we're going to cultivate this breed of apple because no one else may be doing it. So I'm not even going to try to pronounce some of this stuff. I can pronounce Sundance and I can pronounce Hawaii. How about that? But there are a few, and there are some that I know are already sold out for this season that they don't have. This Milwaukee apple, have you had the Milwaukee apple?
I have not.
You have, and so there are apples that we know, everyone's in love with a Honeycrisp and all of those things. But who else has the Milwaukee apple? you have to come to the West Allis Farmers Market and get a Milwaukee apple. I mean, come on. The Wolf River I have used the Wolf River before as well. And so again, first planted along the bank of the Wolf River near Fremont. It's excellent for eating, baking, cooking, and drying. I think after this they'll hire me. How about that? The point of this is, as you indicated, when you come to a true farmer's market, you're going to get variety. You're going to get depth in food. You're going to get, at a market this size, produce that you are not going to find anywhere else. And that's what makes it so important to shop local and to buy local, and to make that extra effort to bypass, this time of year especially, your local grocery store, because these farmers here really, they need to sell this stuff. We're nearing the end of the season. The West Allis Farmers Market, its last market will be the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So we still have a full month here, but the farmers are working hard, and so let's get out here and support them.
Now, usually we talk about a book. Are there any books that you would recommend this month?
Yes, right now I am reading a cookbook. I am reading The Nourishing Asian Kitchen. The Nourishing Asian Kitchen, I can speak. And it's by Sophia Ng, E-N-G. Because I am around so many Asian growers at the Fondy Food Center and with the Fondy Farm Project, and once again, I have been introduced to so many different kinds of produce that I've never experienced before. I decided to spend this fall really focusing on cooking some Asian dishes based on many of the things I'm purchasing from among farmers.
Venus Williams is the executive director of Alice's Garden and the Fondy Food Center. She's also our regular Dig In contributor. At WUWM.com, you can find our previous conversations and photos of our trip to the West Allis Farmers Market. Have you heard of the Hodag? Coming up, we'll learn about the Rhinelander legend. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. Halloween is coming up, so we're sharing some spooky tales and ghostly stories this week. Today we're talking about the legend of the Rhinelander Hodag. The hideous green beast has become a symbol of pride for the northern Wisconsin city. To learn about the lore of the Hodag, Lake Effect's Excret Nunez speaks with T. Krulos, who wrote about it for Milwaukee Magazine last year.
The Hodag is this terrifying beast that lives in the woods of Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And the origin of this dates back to 1893. There was a character named Eugene Shepard, and he was a land surveyor for the lumber companies. So he spent a lot of time hanging out at lumberjack camps, talking to lumberjacks and sharing stories. He comes into town one day, and he has a photograph of what he says is a monster that he saw in the woods and was able to take a picture of. And a lot of people believe him, even though by this point he's sort of gotten a reputation as the town prankster. And if you see this photo, you're kind of like, wow, how would anyone get fooled by this? But you got to remember, this is an era long before CGI or Photoshop or even movies. Movies are just starting to become available, so a lot of people haven't even seen a movie at this point. And a lot of people believe that the camera doesn't lie, and that's true, but the person behind the camera can lie. So it turns out that he had made this monster out of carved wood and some old bull horns, and he made this monster with horns and fangs and a row of spines down its back. And it's to people at the time, it's very believable and frightening.
So kind of like Loch Ness Monster-y?
Yeah, along those lines, it was intentionally a hoax. He was just like, I don't know, bored, wanted attention. And he kept this going for a while. 3 years later, in 1896, he says, I actually caught a hodag. We put a chloroform-soaked rag on a long stick, and we knocked it out, and I captured one. And he actually displayed this at the Oneida County Fair in a tent. It was a dark tent. People would walk in. He had the sculpture in a cage, and then he had an assistant hiding underneath the cage that would move it around and make growling noises.
Whoa.
And people, again, believed this was real. And word got to the Smithsonian Institute, and they're like, oh, a new animal. We're going to go up to Wisconsin and check this out. And that's kind of when the hoax was over. He had to admit he had been fooling everyone. But it's really great because now the hodag has become like the town symbol of Rhinelander. They realized that this would be a good way to draw in tourists and just sort of a symbol of Rhinelander pride. So like the high school football team are called the Hodags. They have a big hodag statue outside of their tourist office, and they have a hodag festival. There's even, and I mentioned this in the article, a hodag store, which specializes in souvenirs and merchandise. So it's just kind of fun that they've really embraced this monster as like their town symbol.
Right. I mean, it seems like Eugene Shepard was all in on this ring. He was really all in. I don't know. I mean, it's such a great story. I can imagine why the city would make it its symbol.
Yeah.
So can you kind of elaborate a little bit on like how else they take pride in it? I know you mentioned the Hodag store was something.
Yeah. And that started off as like kind of a normal antique store, but the proprietor, who I had a chance to talk to, Ben, he said people were coming in all the time asking if he knew where to get hodag souvenirs. And so he started by putting a shelf, and then it was a couple shelves, and then he turned the whole store into a hodag store. And by the way, this monster is supposed to be green. And so he ended up painting the entire store a hodag green color to draw people in. But there's a Hodag Country Music Festival. There's also a newer festival called the Hodag Heritage Festival, and that one's more folklore centered. So they'll talk about the Hodag and other Wisconsin, ghost stories and legends and stuff like that.
Whoa.
And the great thing about the Hodag is it's a uniquely Wisconsin thing. And there's other towns across the country like this. For example, Point Pleasant, West Virginia, has a story of the Mothman. In the 60s, there was a wave of these Mothman sightings, whatever it was. And so they've embraced that as well with a festival and a Mothman museum. So it's very similar to that. And I love it when these towns are like, well, here's something we have going for us, even though it's a little strange. This is something that can draw in tourists. We can have celebrations. So it's just really fun. And especially this time of year, of course.
Absolutely. And I'm also curious, like, how has the look of the Hodag changed over the years? You kind of described it like he was kind of a box at the end of the day. And yeah.
Yeah, the original one that Eugene carved, I mean, it looks kind of cool, but it's kind of crude looking. But if you compare that with the Hodag statue that they have now in Rhinelander, it's this very sleek, very well-designed fiberglass statue. But, it's always had the same characteristics, bright green, big fangs, claws, horns, and spikes. So it looks pretty similar.
Yeah, and I'm also curious, you focused on writing about so many different monsters and where they, originate from. What made you specifically want to focus on writing about the Hodag?
Yeah, well, I've loved monster stories since I was a kid. I used to love to watch Godzilla movies, and I was very interested in mythology and folklore and anything to do with monsters, really. So when I was talking to one of my editors at Milwaukee Magazine, I was like, why don't we revisit a classic? The Hodag is just such a great story. The Hodag store was kind of a fresh angle to that.
And have you yourself seen the hodag in Rhinelander?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. My parents took us on a trip up north and specifically made a stop in Rhinelander because they knew that I would probably like the hodag story. And they have like a lumberjack museum in Rhinelander. And one thing they have on display there is a replica of the original hodag that someone carved in a case.
That's
and
neat.
I loved it, of course, and they bought me a hodag t-shirt, and I was super happy about that.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, well now I want to go, and I will be visiting Rhinelander soon. Well, T, thank you so much for speaking with me today and talking all things hodag.
Thank you very much.
T. Krulos is a local writer. He spoke with Lake Effect's Exgrit Nunez last year. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll chat with the author of Inherited Inequality and explore the real impact of single-parent homes on racial inequity. Plus, we'll help you plan a trip to the Stevens Point Sculpture Park in a new Wandering Wisconsin. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.